Clint. Steve Moore, alcoholic. Steve. Can y'all hear me all right in the back? In case I say something important, I don't want you to miss it. It probably ain't gonna happen, but just in case. Thanks, Clint. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the invitation. You meet a guy like Clint, you better remember his name. I mean, it looks like he could be a bully. I'm not sure, but so I always try to remember people's name. That's one of the things Tom Ivester, he was good at that, and I try to welcome him to our home group. And unfortunately, I must have done a lousy job with Clint. He joined y'all's group. I saw that. But anyway, good deal. And by the way, congratulations to the new members that have joined this group. I'm telling you, for me, joining a home group and getting involved in that home group is the most important thing, one of the most important things I've ever done in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I wouldn't take that responsibility lightly, and that's definitely a huge step in the right direction, joining a home group and getting involved in a good home group. So I am a member of the Primary Purpose Group in Southern Pines. We meet at the First Baptist Church. For those of you that have never been there, on Mondays and Thursday nights, 7 o'clock. So we'd love to have anybody visit. Hopefully when you come to that group, you're going to experience a solid meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think there's a lot of groups in our area that would be the same experience, and I know Keeping It Sober here is one of those groups. That you come here on Tuesday or Saturday nights, you're going to be, you don't have to guess where you're at. You'll be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a big deal, because that ain't always the case. You travel around, go to some other areas, and it could be hit or miss. So I appreciate all the effort, all the work. Y'all decorated this building nicely. You got a typical alcoholic Christmas tree in the corner here. I mean, one guy was trying to come in. We almost had to trim the tree so he could come through the door. Now I'm trying to figure out, it's either John or Jonathan bought that tree. They had to get the biggest one in the forest. So I don't know, one of those guys, I've got it narrowed down to those two. I could be wrong, but I don't know. If they didn't get that tree, they missed a good opportunity. Because anyway, good to see these guys. Couple things too. Now, good to see my good friend Andrew over here, smiling. He's cleaned up. He's had a shower. He's smelling good. You can tell he's not homeless. That's a big deal. So it's good to see you, Andrew. And my nephew, a lot of you knew my brother Bill. He passed away in 2010 or 2011. This is his son Matthew. He comes and visits every Christmas, and my man, the recorder man, CC. I can't. TC. I don't spell well, but I got it. TC. He asked Matthew, he said, "Man, you mind if I record you tonight?" Matthew said, "No, I don't care." I'm like, "TC, I'm the one doing the speaking though, and I don't care either, but I thought maybe you were going to get up here and tell your story." So we got a couple of prophets. We got Andrew, Matthew, and Ina and Deborah trying to figure out if there's any more prophets in here. I don't know if they were prophets or disciples, or maybe that was the same thing, but anyway, they need a sobriety test, those two right there, because they acting funny. But anyway, it's good to be here. It's good to laugh, and I love being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I told you I've got a home group. I've got a sponsor. I'm current with that sponsor. I think that's important to know, because I've got guys that could get up here and say they've got a sponsor, and I ain't real sure what that would mean. If you would really press them on it, would there be enough evidence to really convict them of being a sponsor or having a sponsor? Probably not. But I'm current with my sponsor. I meet with him every month. Don't usually meet because I've got crisis going on. I just like to, catch up, and I stay current. Try to stay current in steps 10 and 11 today. That's not always been the case. But what I find is I tend to have a little more peace in my life if I'm trying to treat people right and stay current with my sponsor. I know he's got a sponsor, and I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to sponsor guys. And, I think, at the end of the day, that's one of my most important responsibilities in Alcoholics Anonymous is, am I reaching out to the new guy? Am I willing to take the time to sit down and read with the new guy? And I don't say that to be braggadocious, or I certainly don't mean to. I've just had some important leaders in my life that they showed me that's what they do, and they had good lives. And what I mean by a good life is they were solid, and they had some peace, and they had some purpose, and they just were settled in to Alcoholics Anonymous and being good members, and that's one of the ways they do it. So anyhow, maybe that's hopefully I didn't leave anything important out. Hopefully some of that was important. Now, my sobriety date is March 26, 1984. And I'm a guy that was, and I'll hopefully get into a little bit in my story, but I wasn't a guy that really tried hard to get sober or stay sober. Prior to Alcoholics Anonymous, we'll kind of clarify that. I don't make it sound like it was easy and just came in here and stuck sober and lived happily ever after. But I was a guy prior to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew there toward the end of my drinking, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't real sure what it was. Of course, I wasn't a complete idiot. I knew a couple of problems I had. One was lack of money. It wasn't lack of power. It was lack of money. And the other one was the police. If they would just quit harassing me, my life would have been a lot better. And a couple of things I realized today is the reason I had a lack of money because I didn't have a job, and I was a poor thief, and I was scared to steal from anybody except for my family, so I didn't do a lot of stealing outside of my parents. And the other thing is, I had no purpose. I was just completely lost, and I didn't know what to do about it. But I was pretty sure drinking may have had something to do with it. But I wouldn't have been even closely admitted to anything like that. So when I got here, and started being introduced to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, it made no sense. But I'm a guy that I got to the point where I was desperate, and I knew something was wrong. I really didn't believe Alcoholics Anonymous was going to be a solution. If I had a spiritual illness, which I didn't really doubt that, but if the solution was going to be something of a spiritual nature, man, that might work for y'all, but it wasn't going to work for a guy like me. I wasn't interested in that, and even if I was interested, I knew that wasn't for me. That it wasn't that I didn't believe in the God, but I just was, I guess you'd say, agnostic. Like the book says, I had no knowledge of God, and whatever knowledge I had was just it was wrong, and I just didn't think it'd be possible for a power like that to have anything to do with a guy like me. But what I did is I was willing to show up and continue to go through the steps because I was desperate, and so that's why I'm a guy that I picked up one white chip when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never looked back. Now, I probably did as much wrong in my journey of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous as I did right. I think one of the things, if I did anything right through these years, was I don't guess I ever really doubted the fact that I was powerless over alcohol. That if I pick up that first drink, I'm done. I'm not a guy that ever really tried to drink socially. I knew that was not even going to remotely be an option. So I think that's one of the things that I did right, and maybe I was able to connect with the power just enough every day to change my life and to stay away from that first drink. And the book talks a lot about that. That's my biggest challenge early on. How do I stay away from that first drink? And I'm a guy that I don't believe recovery from alcoholism in Alcoholics Anonymous is a crapshoot. I believe if I wanted to get well, I think if anybody wants to get well, the directions are right there in our book. It tells us precisely, specifically, and clear-cut directions how to recover from alcoholism. We don't have to guess about that. Now, it's important to get a good home group like this group here. It's important to get a good sponsor. But what I found was it was important for me to take the actions. I don't care how good my home group is. I don't care how good my sponsor is. I don't really care how much I pray. If I'm not willing to take those simple actions that's laid out in that book, I'm a guy that I don't care how long I've been sober, I can be drunk tomorrow. Because I understand that And my good friend Tom, I don't know why, I never set out to think a lot about what Tom said over the years, but it comes to mind. He said, by working those steps, the obsession to drink had been removed, but he don't know how far it's been removed, so he never let up on the spiritual program of action that got him to where he was. And so I take that stuff to heart. So I know I'm not here to preach. That might have sounded a little preachy. Maybe I should have been a preacher. I don't know. Kelly, what do you think? Bad idea. You got it right over here. Mary Kay seconded that emotion. So my job really is to get up here and tell my story and talk about drinking whiskey, and I'm going to talk about a lot of other stuff too, because my job is to share my experience, and so I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to do it in a respectful way, and I'm not going to take step 5 up here. Not that anybody would be shocked by my 5th step. I mean, we listen to 5th steps all the time, and even if we are shocked, we act like we're not shocked. Well, yeah, I did that. Whatever, 2 or 3 of them, yeah, I had 5 or 6. It didn't matter. But anyway, so I'm glad to be here. And I'm a guy, I was born and raised here in Moore County. I got sober. I was born and raised in Carthage. Now, I don't like to admit that. I currently live in Southern Pines. I hate that I'm being recorded. Can we edit that out? Because Carthage is a great place to grow up. It got a little better when I moved away from there, but it was a good town, and I enjoyed being there, and I enjoyed running the streets, and I was the youngest of 6 kids, and so I had good parents. They instilled good work ethic, good moral values. We went to church every Sunday. We were Presbyterian, so I don't know that you would say that we were real religious. Not that Presbyterians aren't real religious, just we weren't really, but we did go to church. I'll never forget one time somebody asked my nephew, he's about 6 years old, they said, "Are you Christian?" And he said, "Oh no, we're Presbyterian." Now, I'm not taking a shot at Presbyterians. That's a true story, and it happened. I swear it did. At least I'm telling it for the truth. So anyway, but good family, growing up in a good church, and I don't know, they were probably good preachers, but I was a kid that was kind of checked out and removed from whatever it was they were talking about. They were talking about Matthew and Andrew and all the other, I think there was a Bartholomew or whatever, the disciples and the prophets and stuff. I didn't understand any of that stuff, and I just didn't get it. And they were probably explaining it in the simplest terms. But it wasn't simple enough for me because I was a guy just checked out and removed from that kind of stuff. My parents, they owned a Western Auto Store there in Carthage, so that was kind of back in the day like a mini Walmart. I mean, and I didn't really realize, looking back, I realized that was kind of a big deal with a kid growing up. I mean, we had toys, there was all kinds of stuff, and, once I became, teenager and got a car, I mean, we sold stereos, speakers, I mean, car parts, anything we needed for a vehicle or whatever, just growing up. I mean, we had it kind of right there at our disposal. So my dad, I worked in that store from as early as I can remember, and my dad was mechanically inclined. He taught that to me. I could fix stuff. I can't fix a chair. I tried to fix the chair, and it fell apart when Matthew sat down in it, but put me on anything else, I'll probably do a good job, just mess with any chairs. But I enjoyed, I had a good childhood growing up. And, Christmas was a big time. It was a big deal. I mean, when your dad kind of owns a toy store, you get bicycles, you get a lot of toys, you get a lot of stuff. And, it was just, it was a good experience. Now, we fought and fussed and cussed like cats and dogs. I mean, that's what family does, I guess. But at the end of the day, we always had each other's back. That you could always just count on your brothers and sisters being there for you. And so, nothing traumatic happened in my life. But here's, so I was a young guy, growing up in that environment, played baseball. My dad would take us fishing. He would take us, never was a big hunter, but he had firearms, and we'd go out target practicing. And I just love that stuff. I was fascinated with firearms, fishing, and the whole 9 yards. And so it was just a good experience growing up. Now, and I was an average kid in school. Now, I never really, but here's the deal. Here's what was going on inside of me is I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel average. I felt anything but average. I just had that sense of insecurity, of feeling less than, a lot of fear, anxiety. And I can't really put on any outside circumstance that would make me feel that way. I don't know, but it seems like that's somewhat of a common denominator for a lot of us alcoholics is on the outside we're going to look good and smell good, but on the inside, I was dying and I didn't understand much of what was going on and just felt less than. And so, what happened with me is, so I kind of get into the drinking part of my story early on. I was camping out with some buddies of mine. I was in the Boy Scouts too. Now I'll tell you what kind of Boy Scout I was. This is pathetic. Can we cut the recorder off? I'm sure they'll sue me over this if I tell it. I'm going to tell it anyway. I was the Boy Scout that would, once I kind of got into drinking and smoking weed, that when we go on those camporees or whatever they call them, jamboree, camporee, we were camping out. We were like unsupervised for the weekend. They loved it when I showed up. I mean, I was a guy that had the goods, and so we had a good time being in the Boy Scouts. Let me tell you about how I progressed in the Boy Scouts. Now, I don't remember the ranks, but here's how I progressed. I knew where they kept the merit badges in the cabinet in the basement of the church. So I would go steal my merit badges to get my ranks or promotions or whatever. Now here's the sad part about that. I told you I'm a bad thief. I never became Eagle Scout. I don't understand that. If you steal your way through Boy Scouts, you should at least be successful enough to be an Eagle Scout. I never made it. I'm pretty sure I got kicked out before that happened. I might have got kicked out for stealing. I don't know. But that was just kind of how I was going. But what led into that? Now I'm camping out one night with these guys, and we're right outside of Carthage, and so we're camping out, and all I know was we start drinking this MD 2020, and I'm telling you that. You can laugh or shake your head. Well, that is the drink of choice in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't care. You can't mention MD 2020 in an AA meeting and somebody's identifying. Now, y'all might not identify with anything else I say, but y'all know that I'm a bad wino, alcoholic, and a drunk. We got all three of those covered. So I don't know, if I had known that I was going to have to talk about my first drunk being MD 2020 at an AA meeting, I would have drank. I would have found something else to drink. I would have went a little higher up on the shelf, got something a little more sophisticated like TJ Swan or Boone's Farm or something like that. I mean, it just has a nicer ring to it. But MD 2020 got a hold of that Mad Dog, and when the doc writes about, I drink and I enjoy the sense of ease and comfort that comes by taking a few drinks, I identified with that. Because I knew whatever it was going on inside of me, the fear, the feeling less than, the anxiety, that I just don't measure up, I'm not enough, that stuff went away. It'll subside. It's funny how distilled spirits will make all that stuff go away, and that was my experience. If I could have had some kind of spiritual experience within that church that had made me feel different, or whatever, maybe my story would have been different. I'm not saying I wish it would have been. I'm grateful for where I'm at, but it took that alcohol to make that stuff go away and just to quiet the insecurities that I had. So I didn't automatically spin out of control at 12 years old and become a wino, but I wanted to. Every opportunity I got, I was wanting to get something to drink and, just hang out with the guys. Wanted to hang out with the girls. Thought a lot about hanging out with the girls, but the girls apparently weren't thinking much about hanging out with us because it was always just us guys up until high school anyway. But So the drinking's in place. It registers in my mind what that'll do. Well, my parents, they had quit drinking, in the early 70s. I think Dad had a scare or whatever, so they weren't drinkers. I don't know that they really ever condemned drinking, but they certainly didn't promote it or condone it, I guess you might say. What happened about this same time, 11, 12 years old, I go off with an older brother of mine and one of his friends. And, you know, they break out, and I like smoking cigarettes, and I enjoyed that, and there's no big deal smoking cigarettes, but they started smoking something that they were just rolling their own cigarettes, and they started smoking something besides cigarettes, and they introduced that to me. And I love that too. And, you know, I kind of think about it. I got a niece, you know, getting ready to turn 13, and I got thinking if somebody would do that to one of my nieces or nephews, there'd be trouble to pay with that. But, and I don't know, but there was no thought about that. Apparently on their end, so my brother would have been 15, 16 years old, and there certainly wasn't any thought on my end. Nobody ever had to twist my arm to do anything. I was just always, I guess, adventuresome or maybe borderline stupid. I don't know, but I didn't care. I was willing to do whatever. So there wasn't any, I wouldn't even consider it peer pressure or anything like that. So I got the drinking going on, you know, and love, you know, smoking cigarettes and smoking dope, and so that's just kind of what I do. So I get to high school, and I do that the next few years, from 12 to about 15, 16. I get to high school, and you know, so I'm just, by this time I'm wide open, and you know, there's really not going to be any slowing me down at that point. You know, I didn't get in a lot of trouble with that. I don't know. I'm a guy that flies below the radar. I'm gonna be sneaky, and I'm going to try to get by with stuff, and I'm not going to just be completely out of control with it. And so we get to high school. I'm running with a new set of friends or some different friends. The girls come on the scene, and I'm loving everything about it. And you know, so we're smoking weed every day. We're drinking heavily on the weekends, and the party's on. And kind of like Bill Wilson, I have arrived. You know, and especially when I turn 16, I get my driver's license, and I get a new freedom and a new happiness. You know, I just, you know, there's nobody paying attention to me. I will tell you an experience, and this is the kind of friend I was. So by this point, Dad, I'm still working in the store. He's not paying me enough, so I'm stealing money. I'm stealing merchandise. I'm selling it. And basically robbing them blind. Had a combination to the safe. My dad was a smart man. I don't know why he thought that made sense, but I'm not even sure he knew he had the combination to the safe. But anyhow, so stole a lot of money and just took advantage of my parents like that. But just so by this time, I'm incredibly. It's just like the book says. I'm a guy that's incredibly selfish and dishonest, and I don't really care about anybody. All I want is what's in it for me and what can I get out of any situation. And just to kind of give you an idea of what that would look like, you know, one night we were leaving a party, and I'm 15 years old. The guy that we're with, I guess he's probably 17 or 18. He's got a car. His girlfriend's with us. She's 15, and she's driving. And he's in the middle in the front seat, and I'm in the passenger side, and it's foggy late one night, and she runs through a stop sign and kind of hits an embankment and wrecks the car, and we're all shook up, and I'm freaked out, and I don't know what to do. We get out of the car. I know her and I got out of the car, and it just so happened the guy we knew was coming along, and we're like out there where Union Pines is. It's like the middle of nowhere. And this guy comes along, and her and I jump in the car with him, and we leave. And we don't know if the other guy that was in the car, we don't know if he's hurt. We don't really know if he's dead. And I'll speak for myself. I really don't care. You know, I don't want to get in trouble. I want to get out of there. And that's what I did. Good news is the guy was okay, and his car was total loss. It didn't survive so good, but he was okay. But that was the kind of friend I was. When things got tough and the heat was on me, I'm gone. You know, don't look for me to hang around and help you or do anything for you. I'm out of here. And that's just the way I was. So anyhow, I got through high school somehow. Skipped school. We'd go shoot pool, ride down to Fayetteville. Didn't get in a lot of trouble with all that. Like I said, I turned 16, and I had a 68 Camaro that I had been working on, but it wasn't quite ready when I turned 16. So I had, my parents had a 72 Pinto, and so that's what I ended up with. Now that's a stretch from a 68 Camaro to a 72 Pinto. I mean, that'll hurt your ego right there. In case I had one, it was bruised. But anyhow, I had this Pinto, but I did have a nice stereo system. It had like 1,000 watts per channel or whatever it was. I mean, the system in it probably was twice what the car was worth. I mean, it was just, it was nice. And so I just loved riding around, listening to Led Zeppelin, Leonard Skinner, Pink Floyd, the Eagles. And, you know, I just loved everything about that. We would hit the dirt roads up in Glendon, and it would be like a dirt track. God forbid if we'd ever met anybody coming around one of those curves, but we would hit the ditches and come out, and you know, the party was on. I just loved everything about that. You know, what would happen is a lot of times I'd tell my parents I'm staying with somebody, spend a night with a buddy of mine, and he's telling his parents the same thing, so we're out all night. And sometimes if we lied real good, we'd be out all weekend. And by this time, we had expanded our horizons, because just drinking and smoking weed, you can't stay up all night and all weekend. So we ventured into some other stuff, and I love that. Anything that would make me roll longer, faster, harder, I was willing to do it. And so we got into a lot of that stuff. And but drinking and getting drunk was always the center of everything else we did. I mean, the other stuff was almost just extracurricular activity. But there's going to be alcohol, and there's going to be a big party. And so, by the time I'm 16, I'm out of control. I rolled through high school. Thank God, I don't know, they graduated me. I guess they just got sick of me being there. Eventually, they just told me to go on. And that's why I call it high school. I stayed high all 4 years. I don't know if that has any correlation, but that may not be funny. I don't know. But I'm just trying to piece it all together, and that's all I could come up with. But, it's a funny thing. I think about Matthew. Now, Matthew, his last name is Moore. And but I think right there it ends, because he doesn't drink, he don't smoke. I don't think he's doing any drugs. If he is, he hasn't shared them with me today. And I mean, the guy is just like he's a guy that is just going somewhere. He's getting an education, and I don't even know why I threw that in there, but it's inspiring to me to know that guys don't have to grow up like me. The kids, because he's 20. You just turned 21, right?
I'm 20.
20? He's almost 21. He's working on it. He's never had a DUI. That's crazy. I mean, I had 2 by the time I was 20. Not that that's something you need to shoot for. I'm just saying that I'm not sure if you're more or not. But anyway, maybe that's an outside issue. I don't know. See, everything seems to be an outside issue these days. But keep up the good work anyway. Don't follow my footsteps. You have to erase all this story. But anyway. So I get out of high school, I do graduate, and, so I'm 17, 18 years old. And what happens, my parents, this is the early 80s, and my parents, the interest rates go up, the economy kind of sucks. I'm stealing them blind, and, they end up filing bankruptcy. They close the store, they file bankruptcy, their house is foreclosed on. And I don't take all that ownership of all that, but I know I had a piece of it. And hopefully I'll get into talking about the amends piece of that, because that was critically important. I'm at peace with that today. That whatever ownership I did have in that I've made that right, and I continue to try to make it right. And that's not easy to do. So anyhow, they're in tough shape. I'm living at home. I'm taking advantage of my parents. I'm stealing. I'm taking advantage of anybody that crosses my path. I get lucky there for a couple of years. I get a girlfriend that her dad deals a lot of cash money, and she's a good thief. She's stealing a bunch of it, and I like it. And so I don't have to really work. I mean, I don't have any bills to pay, and I mean, the party's on. And so here's what I know, though. I know I'm in trouble. I know I need to go get a job. I need to make something myself. And inside, I've got those dreams and those aspirations to do something. I've got good intentions, but that's all I've got. Because I'm thinking tomorrow's going to be another day, and I'll get up, and it's just the same old thing. I'm run up with my guys, and we're hanging out, and we're drinking, and we're smoking, and hanging out at the rock quarries and swimming during the summer. And, it was fun up until a point, and then I know that my life is falling apart. I don't even know if you call it falling apart. I ain't even put anything together by this point. It's just a mess. but I continued to live like that for the next 2 years. Now, by this time, I'm waking up and I'm shaking in the morning. I'm sick. I'm pretty much broke all the time. If I've got any money, it's because somebody's probably giving it to me, or I'm hanging out with somebody that's kind of paying the way. And you know, I don't know what to do. You know, I know this. I go from drinking because I enjoy it or like partying or getting drunk. I'm drinking really at this point, it's out of necessity. I know if I throttle back for 2 or 3 days or try to lay off, I'm going to be shaking and so sick by the third day that I can't even function. And so I know that I've got to drink some alcohol every day just to kind of keep it going. What happened at 18, that was kind of my first, I've had a lot of close calls with the law, but I had my first brush with the law. And you know, I get pulled over. I'm riding around Carthage late one night. The deputy sheriff pulls me over. He didn't have much of a sense of humor. He asked me to get out and walk that line. I'm like, dude, I'm too drunk to walk. That's why I'm driving. So, he didn't. I'm glad y'all thought it was funny. He didn't, because we went to jail. And you know, I got my first DUI then. And, you know, I blew a 19. He said it's closer to a 20, but we'll call it a 19. I don't know why he shortchanged me on that breathalyzer, but he did. And, you know, and Carthage was kind of a cool town to grow up in, because I would get pulled over sometimes and the cop would say, you need to go home now, or they would, maybe somebody's riding with them, they'd get that guy to drive my car home and they'd take me home. And, you know, I had a couple of times the cop would come up, you know, we'd be hanging out uptown and come up and search me and take my weed. And I don't know why I couldn't ever hide my weed, because he didn't do a full body strip search. I mean, he empty your pockets, and I'm like, you know, there it was. But he told me, he said, I'm gonna get you eventually. You know, so and the other cool thing about Carthage, I will throw this in there, that when you turn 16 in Carthage back in the day, if you could drive and pull through the drive-through at the beer store, they would sell you beer. Now, the drinking age was 18 at the time, but in Carthage it was technically 16. Once you got your driver's license, you were good to go. And that guy was so cool. If I had some hot beers in the car, I could run through that drive-through and trade them in for cold ones. How cool was that? We never thought about taking the caps off, and never mind, substituting. But anyway, you know, I'm 18, I get my first DUI, and that's almost like a badge of honor with the guys and the girls that I run with, because everybody's had at least 2 or 3 by that time. Usually I'm falling behind. So anyway, but that doesn't slow me down. I continue to drink, and really for the next 2 years, I'm out of control. And I had a lot of fun drinking. There's a lot of good times, but I'll tell you, 18, 19, 20, there wasn't much fun drinking for me. And I would have never told you that. I would not even remotely gotten honest with anybody about that. So what happens, I roll on the next 2 years, and I continue to live at home, take advantage of them. I can't work. I can't hold a job. I don't want a job. It interfered with my drinking. Most people, if drinking interferes with the job, they either throttle back or quit drinking. Not me. I quit the job, and with no intentions on getting another one, if it's going to be that much of a commitment. So I just, it's a funny thing about a job. They want you to show up. You know that story in the big book that the guy, the car salesman, had that word with the boss? He said, I showed up on Tuesday morning and had some words with the boss. Well, if he's like me, he probably was supposed to have been there on Monday morning and wasn't. Those are probably like, where the hell were you at, Jim, on Monday? But anyway, I didn't mess with a job anymore after that. And so what happens in January of 1984, I'm sitting uptown in Carthage at the laundromat, hanging out about 10, 11 o'clock at night. Now, there ain't nobody up there at that time of night except for me and the police. And I know him and he knows me, and why I thought it was a good idea to be sitting up there that night, I don't know. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, I'll tell you that. But anyway, by this time I had become an entrepreneur, though. I knew I needed to buy and sell some stuff and make some money. And so when he rolled up beside me this night. He searched me. Again, I hadn't got the stuff I'm buying and selling. You just need to hide it a little better than I was. And so I've got an ounce of weed broken up in quarters, and so he arrested me for felon possession and my second DUI. And I'm scared to death. I've always been scared of the police and going to jail and prison. But he takes me downtown or uptown to Carthage, and the magistrate there, and this is a small town. The magistrate said, "Mr. Johnson, are you sure you want to charge Mr. Moore with all this? Because this is pretty serious charges." I mean, the magistrate's trying to talk the policeman out of charging me with all this stuff. And I love that man. He should have talked harder because it didn't work. Anyway, I was in a lot of trouble and didn't know what to do. So just kind of what I did is again, I'm not stupid. I go see a lawyer and secure a lawyer because I figured that's a good idea. And he tells me to go see a counselor. And so I go see this counselor over at Sand Hills Mental Health, and he tells me about Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I'll tell you, if you don't think the CPC work that we do, cooperation with professional community, if you don't think that's important work, I'll tell you that somebody did some work somewhere along the line that saved my life, because this counselor was non-alcoholic, so he really had no experience or reason to know much about AA, except for somebody apparently said, "Hey, if you know somebody in trouble, Alcoholics Anonymous is a place they can get well," because he told me I might want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And my lawyer told me to go see this guy, the counselor just said look good on my resume in court. This counselor had a heart of a servant, and he told me to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because he knew I was in trouble with drinking and that Alcoholics Anonymous could help me. So I go to my first meeting over at the Episcopal on a Monday night, and I'm just not available. It's kind of like what church was. I'm not available to really get anything out of it. So I go back to see him the next week. He's not impressed with my week of trying to be sober, because I'm sure I wasn't. And he told me about a place in Rockingham called Samaritan Colony that Mike could help me. So I went down there, or he told me about it. It's an 8-week program. I knew he'd lost his mind. You think 28 days is a long time. Try 8 weeks there. That wasn't quite enough for me. I ended up 11 weeks, but that's a whole nother issue. You can talk to Harold about that if you need to, because it's his fault. But anyway, first 2 weeks I didn't train him properly. But that's where I was introduced to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Is that place, there was a lot of AA members that came there. They took us to AA meetings, and that's where I was really exposed to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous through the big book and through other members sharing their experience. And so I was kicking and screaming, and I was at ground zero, but I was cocky, grandiose, arrogant, and just like my life ain't that bad. And but it really was, and I came to terms with the fact that I believed I was alcoholic. I wasn't sure I could stay sober, and I was pretty sure Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't going to work, and like I said, I'm pretty sure spirituality wasn't going to be helpful. But what I did is I brought some willingness to the table. I made a decision I wanted to get well, and I decided that I would do the best I could to follow the program as it's outlined in the book, and from people sharing their experience and telling me what they did. And so that's what I did. I started, going to Alcoholics Anonymous, getting involved, but not at any level that's any depth. But I will just kind of fast forward and let you know that I continue to stay sober. I did lose my license for 2 years, and but what I did was I stayed sober a day at a time, and I started after the first year. I got a place of my own. I started paying my own way, and I started living the seventh tradition, being self-supporting, my own contributions. Now, my parents did help me some along the way with some financial assistance, but when they loaned me money or I borrowed money, I paid it back. And because people in Alcoholics Anonymous said, when you borrow money, you pay it back. Whether you borrow it on a credit card, or you borrow it through a car loan, or you borrow it any way you do that, you pay it back. Because if my word's not any good, there's not anything I've got that's any good. So I've got to be trustworthy. and I'm grateful some guys taught me that. So what happened was, you know, I was able to get my own place. My first 2 years I didn't have license, so I would work odd jobs, you know, day labor or whatever to pay my own way, and to not have to borrow money, and certainly not have to steal anymore. After I got my license back, I ended up getting a job for 5 years. I held a job. That was a world record for me, holding a job for 5 years, like in a row. It's crazy. Now that company, I got laid off in '91. That company was going through some financial hardships too, but I promise you, they didn't let me anywhere near their cash register or save. That wasn't my fault. I swear it wasn't. But anyhow, I got laid off, and I started my own company and part-time, and so I just started doing that full-time. And, you know, just continue to try to be a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous and to be of service. And, you know, a couple things that happened that first 5 years sobriety is, I know most of y'all probably can't identify with this, but that first 5 years, I had to have a girlfriend, and I was successful in getting one. And it was great for about 18 months. I didn't need AA anymore. We were going to church, but I didn't need church anymore. I mean, like, I've got my higher power. I've got what I need. And the trouble with that is she decided to go off to college, and she had other ideas besides, and I wasn't part of that idea any longer. And so I was devastated at 5 years sober. She's gone, and I don't have church. I'm not going to AA, and I'm just spiritually bankrupt, really. But I get back involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I start really becoming a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what happened, and I'm grateful for this. You know, I was things were going pretty good, and business was going good, and as devastating as the relationship was, I knew that wasn't going to define me, and I wasn't going to just like throw in the towel as much as I wanted to. I wasn't going to do it. But anyway, I continue to stay sober, and what happens, and I think about what's a defining moment in my life, and I don't think it's any one thing, but something that made a huge difference in my life is my brother Bill. He said Tom Iverster's leading a workshop in Southern Pines, a Big Book workshop, and he wanted to go. It was over at the Big Book group. When it was meeting, and so I decided to go. And what happened, that was in '96, and kind of what happened in '97, Tom met with a few of us after we went through that, and he said, you know, he's thinking about starting a new home group, and that shocked me because Tom had started a Big Book group, and I you know, but I was listening, and that's where Primary Purpose, you know, kind of came into existence. And the good news is, at least as far as I'm concerned, they say all you need to start a group is some resentments in a coffee pot. And although that might be true, that's probably not the best spirit to start a home group or a new meeting or group. But what we did, as far as I was concerned, is I wanted to do some things that a little different. And when we formed that group, we named it the Primary Purpose Group, and the idea was that that's our job description. It's a cool name, I think, for a home group. So is Keeping It Sober. I think we ought to name ours Keeping It Simple because, well, that's another, strike that from the record, Your Honor. Anyhow, Primary Purpose is the name of our group, and hopefully it is our job description. My primary purpose today is to try to be of service to people and to help people and, you know, show them how, through the book Alcoholics Anonymous, how recovery can take place. A couple things that happened in my life, and you know, you wonder if you can stay sober. So my dad, my parents didn't really, I'm not sure they fully understood I was alcoholic or really cared. They were glad I wasn't stealing from them anymore. I can tell you that. They were glad I wasn't going to jail anymore. But what I was able to do through the years was I was able to make amends a little bit at the time to my parents. Because you can't, for me, I couldn't sit down and say, look, I know y'all hit some hard financial times and went bankrupt, and I feel like I've got some ownership, and here's some money. Because that usually is not how it would work. Because sometimes they'll blow it off and say, no, you just stay sober, that's good enough. And although that might have been good enough for them, it wasn't good enough for me. Because if I stole money from them, I need to pay it back. And I continue to try to make an amends, a living amends to my parents. Dad passed away in '03, and that was a devastating situation. And but he got sick and he passed away. And it's the funny thing about it. And this is what happens when we become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Drinking was the furthest thing from my mind. What I was glad is I was able to be there and be a service to him. I was able to be a son to him. And although paying back money is important, what I stole from them emotionally and I stole from them a son that they deserve to have. You know, that's what I had to pay back. That was important, as well as financial stuff. The other devastating thing that happened in 2011 in January is, you know, my brother Bill, he got sick and he had a stroke 5 years earlier, but he recovered well and was sober for 5 years and helped a lot of people. And he was a solid member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but through some complications or whatever, his health started declining and he passed away. And he and I were thick as thieves. Now, we, growing up, drinking, hanging out together, we I don't know why, we just were like this. We hated each other. And as much as brothers can hate each other, I mean, we hung out together and endured the pain, but at the end of the day, I don't know why, we just did not get along. But the last few years he was alive, I was able to be a brother to him, and he was certainly a brother to me. What a blessing and a gift that was from Alcoholics Anonymous. And when he got sick and passed away, it was devastating. But I knew he was in bad shape, and I knew he wasn't going to get any better. But I was able to walk through that and be the family member and be the brother. And you know, the good news through that is Matthew and I over the years have became pretty tight. I don't know if I should say this or not. I like him a lot better than I did Bill. No, I'm kidding. That's, you know, I can laugh about it and have some fun today. But we're tight. We're thick as thieves, and he's a good influence on me, and I'm glad of that. But I'll tell you something else that happened is a couple of years ago I had a niece, and she was in trouble, and we get the call that she's died, and she's 29 years old, and you know, she just struggled with needing to be sober and couldn't get it. And that was the most intense pain I ever felt. And along with, I'll tell you this, now I work with guys and I carry them through the book, and I had an experience working with a guy taking him through step 4. So I'm telling you, if you get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and make a decision to help people, when it talks about we're trusted service and I'm to be responsible, there's a huge price to pay for that. And I'm working with this guy, and we're in the middle of step 4, and he goes off on a hunting trip and he commits suicide. Now, where do you go with information like that? And I'm like, God, if that's your thanks for trying to help a guy, I'm good. I'm done. And this was several years ago, but I talked to my sponsor and I talked to a mentor, and I got through that. And you know what I found? Just because, just like my alcoholism, I'm not alone. Just because my experience with trying to help people, and they wrote about it in the book, it shouldn't have been a surprise. It says our experiences is going to be hilarious, comic, and also tragic, and that was my experience. Now here's what I want to tie up with that. I had the opportunity almost 7 years ago. We go to Detox, and our group does a lot of stuff as well as this one too. And I met a little, I was going to call him a smart. Well, I met a guy that thought he was smart in Detox from Whispering Pines. Now growing up, if you were from Whispering Pines, you were a rich kid. And I knew this guy, like, I don't even know why he's here other than he was trying to commit suicide. But I carried the message, I shared my story, and I didn't try to tell him what he should and ought to do. And at the end of this month, he's a guy that's going to celebrate 7 years sobriety. That's the gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm confident, I will say this, I don't think it would have mattered who carried the message to him that night. I think if the message of Alcoholics Anonymous was carried to that guy from Jonathan or Mary Kay or maybe even Matthew, who knows, that he would have gotten sober and stayed sober, because it was the action that he took after he heard a message of hope. And so, you know, I'm grateful for that experience. The other thing is, and I'm going to wrap it up with this, you know, the devastation I felt with my niece passing away at 29. I've got another niece, and a lot of you know who she is, just celebrated 3 years in October. What a miracle that is. You know, so I know when that book talks about comic, tragic, hilarious, we have a lot of fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. But there's going to be a lot of experiences that it's not going to make me feel warm and fuzzy. But I'm just grateful for God that He through me taking some action, stepped into my life and expelled the obsession to drink. So Clint, again, thank you for allowing me to share my story.